Hi friends, it's Terri Gaines, independent demonstrator with Stampin' Up. In this video tutorial, I'm going to share a card created with a beautiful stamp set called Shepherd's Care. And the designer series paper I'm going to be using is called Seasons of Elegance Specialty Papers. Both of these products can be found in Stampin' Up September through December 2024 mini catalog. Absolutely love this stamp set, and I'll talk a little bit more about the stamp set in a moment. The designer series paper comes 12 by 12. You get 2 each of the 6 double-sided designs. On one side of the paper, you have the gold foil design. On the other side, you have a background print, and it's the same colors as the front of the paper. Love that fact that they coordinate like that. I'm going to be using these 2 prints for the card I demonstrate in the tutorial. I also have a sample with this paper and a sample with this paper. I'll show you those after I'm through with the tutorial. So let's talk about the stamp set. I absolutely love the images in this stamp set. I love the detail that Stampin' Up has in this design. And it's perfect for stamping with one color. You can stamp it, color it in with watercolor pencils, blends, all kinds of different media, but I'm going to just stamp with one color. The color I'm going to use is Early Espresso for this sample. I'm going to be stamping on the Very Vanilla cardstock, and I'm going to stamp this image on the Very Vanilla scrap piece of cardstock I have. What I'm going to be doing first is getting all the decorative and sentiment images stamped before we go into the detail about the card. With a detailed stamp like this, you want to make sure that you get the ink just on the surface. If you push too hard and get ink into the crevices, you're not going to have the beautiful detail that's shown in the artwork. And a tip for you is if your ink pad is brand new or you just re-inked it, it seems to have a lot of ink on it, take a plastic spoon, the curved part of it, and move your ink so it is not sitting right on the surface. Eventually it will settle right back where it was, but the goal is just to get the ink on the surface. So I'm going to just set my stamp on my ink pad. Stampin' Up ink pads are foam. You don't want to push, as I mentioned, too hard that you get ink in the crevice. I'm just going to set it down. I am tapping it, but I'm really just moving it and making contact with the stamp. I want my ink just on that surface. And then what you want to do is go straight onto your cardstock and then give it even pressure. Don't push so hard that you distort that rubber. You want it just making contact, but you also want to hold it long enough that the ink can absorb into the paper. And then you're going to have all that beautiful detail that is shown on the stamped images. Before I cut this out, I'm going to do the rest of the stamping. So as the measurements I mentioned that I was going to refer to later, I am going to talk about the inside card base layer. That is 4 by 5 1/4. I'm using Very Vanilla. I'm going to stamp the sentiment on this piece, but I'm also going to be adhering this designer series paper on the side here. So I'm just going to set that down right here. I'm not going to adhere it yet, so I can stamp the sentiment. And the reason I don't want to adhere it yet, if I don't like how I stamped it on this side, I can flip the paper over, cardstock over, and stamp on the other side. So let's get that stamped. We want to do all our stamping before we do our assembly. So I'm going to take the sentiment stamp and the same thing, just set it down. I am tapping it, but I'm just moving it around and making contact with the stamp pad. I'm not pushing down. Now I'm going to try to get my spacing, try to get this straight, and make contact with the cardstock, even pressure, give it a time to absorb into the paper. You don't want to rock it, and then you're going to get your sentiment. I'm going to say I'm good with that. So I'm going to move those stamps off on the side. I'll clean those after I'm done with the video. Now I also want to stamp on this strip of paper here. So what I'm going to do is stamp on that before I assemble that. So I'm going to take this star. Now I have my star on here. What I tried to do is make sure that this end of the image was equal to this side of the wood block or clear block. This image is even here. So then hopefully when I stamp this, I get it even centered on my strip of paper. Now the strip of paper is, so I'm looking at the block more than the label, and I'm going to make contact, even pressure, give it time to absorb, and I didn't do too bad. I'm going to be okay with that. And so now I've got that stamped. I also want to stamp this image here. This also has an image with lots of detail. So you want to just make contact with your stamp pad, tap, 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 just making contact. I'm going to take this and stamp that right here. Okay, I didn't get it too straight as far as they're tilted a little bit, but we're going to be okay with that. So now we're going to put the ink pad away. As I mentioned, I'll clean those stamps later. So what I'm going to do next is cut this out. So I mentioned I'm working on these images first. So I have listed in my PDF that the decorative images and sentiment images, I have a countryside corner die, and that's these dies right here. That is 3 by 4.5. That's the second largest in a colored cardstock. I cut that out already with the early espresso cardstock. Then I state that I have the countryside corner die, 2.5 by 4 in white or vanilla. The other two samples I share are with white. This one I use very vanilla, but you can use either for your cards. Like I could be using the basic white for this one instead of very vanilla. I'm going to cut this image out of that. So I'm going to bring in my cut and emboss machine. I'll bring that under the camera here and place that down. I'm going to grab the platforms. So when you die cut, you need platform 1, platform 2, a platform 3. Then you place your cardstock on that. Then you take your die and place the die on there. I like to take Post-it notes to hold that down. So I found these transparent sticky notes. They're like a Post-it note at the Dollar Tree. And what I'm going to do is sometimes I don't need the whole sheet, so I just cut into that to create a little tab, and I tear that off. Then I can hold this die down. So what I'm going to do is place this how I want it to be on my platform. Take this Post-it note or sticky note, place that right there, and put my number 3 plate on top of that. Run this through my machine and it will cut it out for me. So I'm going to move this out of the way, and here we have that image cut out. Now this still has stickiness on it. I'm just going to put it on my machine. I can use that again, use it until there's no sticky left, and we're done with this. I'm going to move this out of the way. All right, so these two get adhered together. So I'm going to do that right now. So let's grab some adhesive. I'm going to put adhesive on the back of this and look for equal spacing on all sides and adhere that. So that's the decorative image. And then I have an outside sentiment that I use the stylish shaped dies for. These dies, you have squares, circles, and banners. I used this banner. I stamped this sentiment in the early espresso on very vanilla cardstock, and I cut that out ahead of time. So I cut that out and then I trimmed it straight right here. So that's my other image. So we've got the images all ready to go. Now what I'm going to do is talk about the card pieces here. So let's talk about the card base. The card base is 8.5 by 5.5. It is scored at 2 locations. I'm going to bring in my Simply Scoring tool. And I'm going to place this in the corner. up against this wall, up against this wall, and I'm going to hold it. I like using the larger end of the stylus. I'm going to score first at 1.5, and then I'm going to score at 4.25. And then I'm going to leave this in here for the time being. So we have this. Then we have a decorative designer series paper layer. This is 4 by 5.25. And if you're interested in knowing why I picked this design for the front and this one for the edge, when I turn this over, I use the design that more has the stripes in it, or the design going this way. You can use either one, and I'll be showing you that designer series paper for the cherry cobbler and the pretty peacock is using the same paper for both. And like I mentioned, I just chose this one for this side. It's probably more detail than I needed to share, but that's what I did do. So we have that. Then we have the inside card base that I talked about, and this is the inside designer series paper layer. That's 1.25 by 5.25. I already told you that I'm going to place it over here. I'm going to use my Simply Scoring tool to help me get that aligned good. I'm going to put adhesive on the back side of this. So it's hard to cover up this side of the paper because that's so beautiful, but it's only a small strip and it works perfect for this card design. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this paper, this inside card base layer, push it against this wall, push it against this wall, hold on to it. Adhesive is on this side. I'm going to hold this up so the adhesive does not touch. Right now I'm pushing it against this wall, and then when I hit this wall and have it in the corner, I can bring this down and then I can get my placement. Now if I have a little bit of misalignment here and I just have a hair of a misalignment, I can bring a paper trimmer in and cut it. But for video purposes, I'm going to just continue with my assembly, and we're going to say it's okay. It's just a slight difference there. So now what I'm going to do is do the assembly. So this card base is, the first score line is folded at a mountain and the next one is at a valley. So basically that's folding your card in half and then folding this flap up like so. Now I'm just going to share a tip with you. This is a simple fun fold, but if you don't want to do a fun fold, you can make the same card, but just fold that. Don't put that score line in here. Put this on the front and then put the other on the inside, and you'll still have a beautiful card. But I think it's fun to have your people you send your card to have a simple fun fold, just being a little unique and different in your card. So I'm going to adhere this inside card base layer to the inside of the card base. I'm going to look for equal spacing on the 3 sides, on the top, bottom, and on the side there. And that's going to be the inside. As I mentioned, this is where if you don't want the fun fold, don't add that score line. But I think you're going to love the fun fold. So the fun fold, you fold that flap that way. We're going to place that down, and our adhesive is only going to go on this flap. And I'm going to share a couple things you want to keep in mind. You don't want it to go higher than, you don't want it to go on the 1/4 or 1/8 inch there and an 1/8 inch there, because our designer series paper will not cover that part up. So to adhere this, I'm right-handed. I'm going to put these 3 fingers to help hold that down. I'm going to put my paper in this hand. I'm going to look for equal spacing on the top, the side, and the bottom. And then as I get that equal spacing, I can flex this cardstock, and then I can kind of watch as I bring this down and place this onto the adhesive, that I am getting that on like the squared like that. So this gets adhered like so. Now this piece gets adhered to the front. You don't have to put dimensionals on this. I like putting dimensionals on. I like giving it a little bit of a dimension. This card will not be too thick. You can still mail it with your standard forever stamp, and if you put one layer of dimensionals on here. So now I'm going to take my backings off using my Take Your Pick tool. Works great to get those backings off. And I'm going to place this equal spacing on the top and bottom, equal spacing on the right and left, and place that down. For this sentiment, I'm going to place mine right across the bottom here. Part of it's going to be adhered to this countryside corner image, and part of it's going to be adhered right here. So I'm going to put adhesive on the back side of this. On that side of it, I'm going to put two dimensionals really close to each other right here. Take the backings off, and I'm going to line it up to the designer series paper. It's going to adhere a little bit right there. And there I have that sentiment on, and as you open it up, it first reveals that right side of the inside, and that's actually how it's going to sit when it's displayed. So you only see that designer series paper. You have to open it up all the way to see the inside sentiment and where you sign the card. This displays beautifully, and I just think it's such a fun card to make with this beautiful stamp set. As I mentioned, I have a sample done with the Pretty Peacock colors, and that's the color of the ink. The card is the very same. For this one, the design this is the gold side of the design, and there's an area that doesn't have a lot of the gold foil. That's what I used, and then I used Versamark ink and the gold embossing powder and embossed the star. So this is another version using the same papers. And this one, I did also emboss this, but because when you emboss, you lose all of that beautiful detail, I'll compare the two. That's an option. You can do this with embossing powder. And for the front, I used Wild Wheat ink and Cherry Cobbler. And this one is also beautiful. Just love the stamp set, love the paper. I hope you enjoyed this fun fold. As I mentioned, I do have a PDF. You can find it on my blog. If you look in the text portion of this video, if you found me via YouTube, you look in the text portion of this video and you'll get a link to my blog post where I'll have the PDF you can download. My PDFs are free. You can download those project sheets. And if you are using my project sheets, I would love to have you subscribe to my YouTube videos, my YouTube channel, to share and like my YouTube videos and blog posts. I appreciate you. Thanks for stopping by. Take care and happy creating.